Card games, digital, online, card games, can't get enough of them, there aren't enough, rain them down on me like a stack of cash, but if the money was digital cardstock with art and attack scores on them, f***ing hell, there are so many. In all my time writing, talking and gesticulating about video games, I've skillfully identified a common opinion. People are a little bit exhausted by just how many digital card games there are now. You've got your Hearthstones, your Magic the Gatherings, your Artifacts, your Gwents, and so on and so on. It's like the MOBA rush of yesteryear when League of Legends' popularity spurred every publisher under the sun to brandish their own MOBA in an attempt to cash in on the hype. Riot Games, ironically enough in the age of a digital card game craze, are bringing out their own digital card game based on League of Legends, Legends of Runeterra. Fortunately enough though, it's doing a lot of interesting things. Namely, Riot have incorporated a lot of League of Legends' features into Legends of Runeterra in a way that makes digital card fighting feel just that little bit more refreshing. Let's talk about a few ways that Legends of Runeterra feels less like a generic card game with a lol coloured coat of paint and more like a card game version of League of Legends. You know what's got a lol-coloured coat of paint on it in a good way though? Some of the metal posters you can buy on Display, who we've recently partnered with to open our very own Rock Paper Shotgun store. There's a link to our hand-picked posters in the description, a little collection for each member of the RPS Video Dungeon. If you buy anything from that store, then a bit of the money comes back to the channel, so if you see something that tickles your interest, keep that in mind. Throughout any given game of League of Legends, your champion will level up with every minion you splat, every monster you slay, and every champion you wreck. Leveling up lets you unlock more of your champion's skills, as well as upgrading each of those skills to make them a bit more punchy. A similar sort of thing happens in Legends of Runeterra, only instead of unlocking and improving skills, each champion will be given passive buffs that persist throughout the rest of each game. Leveling up in Legends of Runeterra happens when your champions achieve a predetermined goal, rather than through gaining experience. Take Garen, for example, who levels up once he's killed an enemy. That level up gives him an extra point of defense and an extra point of attack. Elise, to give another, will level up once 3 or more spiders are played on the board by the start of your next turn, which increases her attack by 2. While these level ups bring about only minor bonuses to your champions, I like that the means through which you achieve them are tailor-made to the kinds of characters that they each are. It's a mechanical means of fleshing out the personalities of whatever champions you're playing. I particularly enjoy how sadistic Spirit of the Shadow Isles, Thresh, will level up once he's merely witnessed 3 enemies dying. He doesn't even need to do anything, he just enjoys murder, and I think that's outstanding. Legends of Runeterra is a solo PvP game, much like most other digital card games out there right now. League of Legends is not, and largely hinges on multiplayer combat involving 2 teams of 5. The way Runeterra emulates this multi-champion team combat is by making each champion in the game their own separate card. Each 40 card deck you build can contain a maximum of 6 champions, and you can mix and match as you please. All of the champions, and every card by extension, are split into different categories called regions, which are a bit like the different colours in Magic the Gathering, and you can have 2 different regions in your deck at any given time. What this encourages you to do is mix and match different champions from different regions that work well together in the same deck, which feels a lot like finding good champion synergies when duo laning in League of Legends. Duo laning being when 2 players playing champions that pair well go down one of the lanes together. Jay Castello, who got a hands-on look at Legends of Runeterra at the Riot offices in Dublin for the RPS site, thinks that while this may appear quite complicated on the surface, it does a good job of encouraging beginners to think about deck cohesion and different playstyles. As someone who's dipped in and out of card games, both digital and in meat space, and has always found optimal deck building to be a little bit overwhelming, this does appeal quite a lot to me as an approachable introduction to better understanding what I'm doing. In Artifact, another digital card game based on a MOBA, there are 3 distinct playing fields, each meant to reflect the in-game lanes of Dota 2. This direct translation makes sense in theory, but what it ultimately leads to is an overwhelming, mind-boggling endeavour where you're effectively playing 3 different games at once in the same game. Following suit with League of Legends being a bit like Dota 2 but a tad easier and a lot more accessible, Legends of Runeterra simplifies this idea while preserving the core impact. Instead of there being 3 distinct lanes in Runeterra, all cards are placed on the same board. What you have to think about though is where those cards are placed, because any card you play will oppose the card placed opposite it. The need to consider where cards might best be placed on the board adds a layer of strategy comparable to lane composition in League of Legends without making things way too complicated for just one person to think about. I think that's what made it so messy in Artifact. In Dota 2 you're playing alongside another 4 people on the 3 lanes you had to control, same as in League of Legends. Imagine having to play a game of Dota 2 all by yourself. It'd be a f***ing shit show. Likewise, it's a f***ing shit show in Artifact unless you're an absolute nutter. The way Riot have made it work in Legends of Runeterra seems like it'll be a lot more approachable. League of Legends' combat encounters have quite a tense and satisfying back and forth rhythm to them. You'll dip in and out of combat, throwing off your abilities and trying to anticipate your opposing champion's moves, in what almost resembles an emergent turn-based situation taking place in a real-time game. Legends of Runeterra takes this rhythm and makes it actively turn-based rather than passively. Each player will take turns acting as the attacker and defender. If you're attacking, you'll use your mana to place cards on the board in front of you. Once these cards have been placed, the defending player will be able to place cards in response to what you've put down, and then all the cards will move onto the active field to duke it out from left to right. This continual exchange of trying to throw things your opponent won't be able to block and keeping things on reserve to block whatever your opponent throws at you, constantly trying to outthink and one-up each other, feels a lot like combat in League. Like sword fighting in real life, there's never this mighty exchange of big and meaty blows. It's more like poking each other a bit until one of you lands a decisive final blow. Legends of Runeterra works like this too. With all the comparisons to be made between Legends of Runeterra and Artifact that you could make, there's probably a question that's been lingering on your mind. What's the monetization in this like? In Artifact, it was pretty naff, with quite an aggressive reliance on real money transactions in order to obtain cards, on top of having to pay for the base game too, making it about as inaccessible on a ranked level as it is to have a fighting chance in Magic the Gathering tournaments. League of Legends has a pretty decent monetization model for a free-to-play game. You can buy champions, XP boosts and runes, which affect the starting stats of your champions, with both influence points, which are earnable through gameplay, and premium Riot points, the latter of which you can also use to purchase skins for your favourite champions. Because you need to level yourself up as a player a certain point to be viable in competitive play anyway, this prevents any nefarious pay-to-win scenarios going on. When Legends of Runeterra launches, it won't have an entry cost. You'll be able to start playing for free. You won't be able to buy random card packs, but they'll be given to you as gameplay rewards. You'll also be able to get more cards by completing expeditions, draft-style games that focus on different regions. There is a crafting system that you can use to purchase cards you want directly, and you'll also be able to buy wild cards that can swap with a playable card of equivalent rarity. What's particularly of note is that regardless of whether you unlock cards by playing or directly purchase them with premium currency, you'll only be able to buy a limited amount of cards at any given moment in time. This is apparently to curtail players turning into whales, because, quote, maybe that's not healthy for them. That sounds alright to me, and it follows suit with Riot's usual approach to monetization, though design director Andrew Yip has said that some elements of the business model could change based on player feedback. Andrew Yip and his team aren't shying away from fears they have after how badly Artifact went down, and with all the comparisons you can draw between that and Legends of Runeterra, that seems sensible. Chatting to Jay Castello at the end of their interview, he said that while they're all understandably afraid of falling flat on their faces, they feel like the way they're going about making Runeterra and the differences in approach that they're making compared to Valve's attempt at a MOBA-inspired card game are going to appeal to players a lot more. It's clear that Yip and the other Riot developers on Legends of Runeterra have really put in a lot of effort into making sure the game feels like a League of Legends card game rather than just looking like one. Because of that, even in a climate where I feel overwhelmed by the sheer volume of digital card games being chucked over me like buckets full of Nickelodeon slime at a TCG special edition of the Teen Choice Awards, it's enough of a difference from what's already out there to make me go, oh, that's interesting, which, given the circumstances, you should take as high praise.
Avarosans, stand together!
If you enjoyed this video and would like to support the channel, please do use the link in the description to check out our Displate store. There's over 500,000 designs, and Displate's unique metal posters are built to last and use a magnet mounting system that doesn't involve drilling into your walls and losing half of your deposit. The three of us here at RPS each have a little collection we've put together that includes our favourites, so make of them what you will. And not only will you be supporting the channel, but you'll also be supporting the environment. For every Displate sold, 10 trees are planted. Trees are nice, and so are we, so it's like killing two birds with one stone, but if you replaced the killing bit with helping out and the stone bit with money. Do you think Legends of Runeterra has a chance of being successful in this day and age? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this little primer for what sort of thing you should expect with the game, why not like the video and subscribe to Rock Paper Shotgun while you're at it to see more videos like it. Cheers very much for watching, and hopefully see you again soon.